Hello, hello, and good morning. Happy 2026. Yes, folks, we are back. Yay! I know. As you guys know, I'm really pumped. I really love our SBDC family. So when we have a chance to get together, connect because we are separated, I get a little sad. So let's start off with if this is your first time joining us, my name is Sadie Uribe, and I'm the media producer for the Los Angeles Regional SBDC. The SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, helping to stimulate economic growth through business advising and development. The LA SBDC offers no-cost services through funding provided by the U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA, and from the California Office of the Small Business Advocate. It's your tax dollars at work. Let's see. Oh, we got a little stuck here. This is how we left to ring in 2026, Lori.
That's great.
There we go. The Los Angeles Regional SBDC Network operates 7 service locations throughout Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. Our services are also offered virtually. We are here to help. We empower small business owners by offering tailored solutions through personalized one-on-one business advising, cutting-edge workshops, and comprehensive programs, all provided at no cost. We are dedicated to supporting your entrepreneurial journey every step of the way. Well, Lori, how are you? I missed you. I can't even tell you how much I missed you.
I know we were talking before the show. I absolutely missed you too, Sadie. And you notice, look at, I already got a note into the chat. Happy New Year. Let's make it a fantastic and profitable year. Remember, that was our goal that we were ending last year with. So, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to see everybody's back. I didn't have a guest this first week saying, okay, well, let's see where we're going with it. So, I told Sadie right before we start, we could be 5 minutes or 50 minutes, depending on what you guys want to talk about. I recalled from our last session in December, there was some confusion and questions, and I said I would go through it a little bit more this week regarding tax things and some questions you had about S Corps and stuff. So I have that list that we can talk about. But throw into the chat any questions, or if you can, be kind to me and throw it in the Q&A because I can catch it better in the Q&A with so much happening in the chat. But if you throw any questions or anything you want to talk about, like I said, on these Lori talks, everything's up for discussion, guys. So it can be business, it can be, personal goals, anything. Let's just have a friendly small biz talk audience participation chat. Okay, let me just go over the few things I have, which I don't have much because of the fact that we're going to have our talk today. Basically, I have, that's actually off. I didn't even take that off. I didn't notice it. December's gone, man. That's gone. But we've got the accounting and the CFO skills webinars coming up in January. And as I mentioned, the only webinars I'll be doing going forward will be these 3. As of right now, till further notice, these will be repeated on a monthly basis. If you missed out on the cash flow, the sales tax, the legal structure webinars, all the other ones I have done in the past, all you have to do is just set up an appointment with me and we can get those questions answered on a one-on-one. And that's all I have because, wait, I should have one more. So look at, hey, Sadie, I'm on the same roll here. So next week we have a dual guest. It's going to be interesting. Both Sarah Peeler and Laura Ibarra is coming on. Now, Sarah is a certified life coach, and she focuses a lot on relationships. And she works with Laura, who does weddings and in Dominican Republic. Quite an interesting team. And I was working with Sarah to answer some questions. She was talking about working with Laura and the advantage of partnering. And I said, well, why don't I get you both on the show to begin with? And you can talk about all kinds of things. So we got 2 business owners, 2 different companies partnering together to help each other be successful. I thought it'd be a fun conversation. I've got the other lineup for January as well. I'm just waiting on some additional copy coming in, and I'll be announcing all that next week. So that is all the announcements that I have today. Sadie, do interrupt me if you see anything in the chat that somebody wants to talk about, because I might not catch it if it's in the chat. But other than that, I'm going to kind of just start rambling off, guys, and do let me know what you want to talk about. And like I said, we'll go 5 minutes or we'll go 50 minutes, depending on what you want to talk about. The Lori ramble is my favorite. Okay, I want to go over just a few miscellaneous random topics, if you will, because there's so much confusion in them. And I'm not doing it in any specific order. There are things that I mentioned before. I'm going to start with the tax requirements for paying estimated quarterly taxes. Okay. Many people don't quite understand how this works. And in actuality, I don't think I've ever heard a tax person, a CPA, or an enrolled agent actually explain it to the company owners in the way the ruling really works. And I'll explain why that is. So, what happens is this is a rule that covers all individuals and all businesses. Okay. So if you make more than $600 a year, or if your business have any transactions, you have to file a tax return. So this rule covers everybody. It's not specific to S corps or sole props or anything. And the rules, a little bit confusing. Sadie, I'm going to say it slow. If you could type it in the chat, it might help if people looked at it right. So by the end of the year, that would be like December 31st, by the end of the year of the previous year, obviously, or this year, you could say, you have to pay in your estimated taxes either 90% of what is owed this year. So 90% of what is owed this year, or 100% of what was, keyword was, owed last year. Now, that sounds like a really convoluted rule. 90% of what's owed this year or 100% of what's owed last year, that doesn't make sense. Let's first break this down from everybody for 1 minute in your mind's eye. Let's be an employee, okay? We get vacation time. No, we're all an employee. When you think about being an employee, you are having taxes removed from your paycheck every single week. IRS, not my words, their words, they define themselves as a pay as you go system, right? So as you make the money, they take the taxes out of your check. You don't have a choice in that. It's already withdrawn. Now, in that, what they are doing is they're taking out the amount that is defined by the W-4 that you fill out. You might remember that you say married, how many kids, and that determines how much tax is being taken out of your paycheck. Now, in that, what they're doing is they're taking out a little bit more than you are going to potentially owe, because they want you to possibly get a little refund, not a huge refund, but they definitely don't want you owing any money because they know you'll go off and spend it, right? So the way that system is, may I say rigged perhaps, is that each week or 2 weeks or a month, depending on when you get a salary check, you are getting a money taken out of your paycheck that is going to actually represent over 100%, right? It's over 100% of what you're going to owe that year. So now let's be a company. In a company, the IRS can't go to your client and say, hey, before you pay the company, I want to take some money out for taxes, right? They can't do that. So when the government tends to not have control, what they do is they have penalties. Think about it like a speeding ticket. If the cop can't control your foot on the gas pedal, the speeding ticket is the penalty to get you to do what they want, right? So in this rule of 90% this year or 100% from the previous year, if you don't follow it, you get charged an underpayment penalty. Okay. So we're going to get to the estimated taxes. So what happens is for a lot of companies, and let's put S corps, taxed as an S corp in our back pocket for a second, because there's another layer of rules on an S corp. Okay. But for companies, let's be a sole prop or an LLC in our mind right now, taxed as a LLC. If you are looking at the end of the year before December 31st, not anybody really knows how much they're going to owe. You didn't go see your tax person, calculate your profit. You don't know what 90% is, right? So you haven't done your taxes, and you won't be doing them until next year, right? When you file them with your tax deadline. So you don't really know what 90% is. So this is why they say, okay, if you pay 100% of what was owed previous year, we're going to check the box saying you won't be fined an underpayment penalty. So that's the safety net, right? So let's play this out for a second. I'm a sole prop, I'm an LLC, I'm taxed as an LLC. It comes near the end of the year. If I had made estimate payments in throughout the year and they equal 100% of what was owed the previous year, I'm cleared, I can do my taxes, and I have no worry about an underpayment penalty. So what ends up happening is that when you go have your taxes done, if you owed money, if you were profitable and you owed money, you get what's called, they call it a coupon, but it's just a little slip of paper. And the tax preparer says every quarter, at the end of the quarter, send in this amount, right? Now, people think that that amount is what they owe in that year, but it's not. It's 100% of the previous year. So that means it could be less, or it means it could be more, right? It's just making sure you don't have an underpayment penalty. And many tax preparers look at it like, okay, if I don't have them do these, estimates throughout the year, come the end of the year, they're not going to come see me. They're not going to have put any money away. Let me just go ahead and do these tax estimates. So give me an idea in chat if you got me so far, because I want to tell you a little behind the scene bit of information for you guys to make good decisions in your company on why I am educating people on how this works. So let's pretend for a second two scenarios, guys. In the first scenario, this current year, is not as good as last year. You're not going to make the same amount of money. You're not going to owe the same amount of taxes. This was something that hit during COVID, right? So unknowing of these ways this works and this rule, the business owners were fretting and they were talking to me. They were like, oh my God, I didn't make my quarterly tax estimate. I can't. And I said, hey, you probably won't even owe that much. Get with your tax person or just skip some of the quarterly payments and check in before the end of the year. Now, the reason I was saying that, guys, is they were paying out the door money that they were just going to get a refund on, and they needed it to pay the current bills. So I see people, company owners, that are not doing as well as the previous year, fretting to make the quarterly estimated tax returns and then borrowing money to pay the bills when they could have actually lessened or missed an entire quarterly estimate, and they could have made sure that they saw the tax person before the end of the year just to make sure they were good. Okay. So that's why I like people to understand the 90-100% rule. Now, the other coin is, say that you are doing much better. I see people think that since they made the quarterly tax estimates, they're good to go, not realizing they may be hit with additional tax requirements in the next year. So I believe, as I always have, in information is power, and you having this information, although I'm not saying to decide this all on your own because you have to know how to calculate it, etc., but have a tax person that you can talk with and you can ask questions to and understand where you are so you can make informed decisions. Okay. Now, if there's any questions on what I said so far, throw it in the chat, throw it in the Q&A, because I want to add another layer to it. And Tara, you're right. It does worsen the financial issues. Absolutely. And remember, this is our year about being profitable, guys. This isn't our year about the ego saying, I got an LLC Gucci bag. You remember that statement from last year? This isn't our ego going, my revenue is. No, that's not the year for that. In my world, I'm not going to impart my views on you guys, but in my world, and what I'm trying to do with my clients is say, this isn't the year of bragging rights, man. This is the year of money in your pocket. Okay. It can be loud money in your pocket. It can be silent money in your pocket. But bragging rights about being some kind of legal structure or bragging rights of what your revenue is, and you can't make your bills and you got debt and you're unhappy and scared and afraid, it's not good, guys. It's not good. So I'm really emphasizing the focus on profitability, which really requires a certain level of knowledge. I digress. Let's pull this S Corp out of our back pocket now. Okay, we got the S Corp. Now, when I say an S Corp, I can be speaking of one of two things. So, first of all, in your mind's eye or in your, what I'm talking about, I want you guys to draw a line like a column, okay? And on one side, it's the words legal. How am I legally organized? How am I registered with the Secretary of State? Am I registered with the Secretary of State? If I'm a sole prop, the answer is no. If I've registered with the Secretary of State by filing articles of organization, I'm registered with the Secretary of State as an LLC. If I'm registered with the Secretary of State as an S Corp, I'm an S Corp, right? Or I'm a corporation, I should say. I'm a corporation. Now, we are a constitutional republic, which plays into our state registrations of our companies. Notice I said registered with the Secretary of State in your state. So if you set up the company in California, it's going to be a little different than if you set it up in Delaware. It's going to be a little different if you set it up in New York, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So when I say the legal column, it's not only how you have registered the company, what documents you are you an LLC, are you a corporation, et cetera, but it's also where are you registered? And in that, we're going to talk about a few things. Spoiler alert, this concept of registering in another state to avoid California taxes. We're going to get into that in a minute. Now, the other column is how are you taxed? So that's the taxation column. Most entrepreneurs, especially when you get into that social media and you start getting the advice on social media, that's not necessarily a good thing. They don't understand that these are two separate columns. They think they're intertwined, like I'm this and that means I'm taxed that way. And it's not true. These are actually two different sandboxes, if you will. It's the legal aspect of the state registration sandbox, and it's the federal IRS declaration of taxation sandbox. And these sandboxes don't necessarily play together in a perfect little pretty way. And that makes it even more confusing for people. So let me give you an idea what I'm talking about. If I am a sole prop, sole proprietorship, in that column of how am I registered legal, there's no check. I'm not, which by the way, I'm a big fan of sole props. You guys that have been around with me know that. So I have no check in it. Now, when I look at the taxation, the actual technical correct terms is I am taxed as a self-employed person. It's just me. I'm a person, not persons, self-employed person. I could also have a partnership. I could have a business partner that I have a company with, and it could be unregistered. People don't ever even talk about that. They don't even realize it exists. Okay. But it's an unregistered partnership. If I look at the legal side, there's no check. You don't see these as often. You used to a lot more. If anybody wants more information on that, they can let me know. But basically, what I'm saying is that you can have an unregistered company that has more than one person, not a sole prop. That's a choice as well. Okay. So as a sole prop, I am taxed as, in IRS lingo, that's why the lingo really matters, as a self-employed person. As an unregistered partner, I am taxed as self-employed persons. Okay. If we get into tax forms, just to have an understanding, as a sole prop, it's a Schedule C. As a partnership, it's a 1065. Okay. Now, if I am an LLC, I registered, let's talk about the state of California right now. I registered in the state of California as an LLC. I got the check mark under legal, I'm an LLC. If I am a single member, because owners of an LLC are called members, not shareholders, because LLCs don't have stock, they're called members. So if I'm a single member LLC, I'm taxed by the IRS, that IRS column as, ready for this, guys? Self-employed person. Oh, I just said the same word as a sole prop. That doesn't make sense, does it? If I am a multi-member LLC, I'm taxed as self-employed persons. So what that means is there is absolutely no taxation difference between a sole prop and an LLC? None. I have a lot of people say, I'm going to start an LLC so I can get a benefit on the taxes. None. I can have more debits and credits. I can have something that I didn't get as a sole prop. Not true. In the legal column, there's a difference, but not in the taxation. I'll tell you a little history. Well, we'll call it storytelling, okay? A brief little storytelling embellished to make it more interesting. So if we think about the IRS, and the IRS has a menu of services, right? So the IRS has on its menu of services, you can be a self-employed person, sole prop. You can be self-employed persons, partnership, or you can be a corporation. And the corporation can be taxed as an S Corp, C Corp, nonprofit, et cetera, right? But as far as their main menu, it's like we got burgers and fries, we got a sole prop, a partnership, and a corporation. That's our three menu items, right? I won't get into how the corporation started with Christopher Columbus. Maybe I'll save that story for another day, but let's just stay with this one. So that's the three menu items. So many years ago, decades ago, I don't remember the exact date, right? Decades ago, many individuals that were involved in the real estate industry. And what I'm speaking of in this, guys, is like real estate development companies, they don't want to be a corporation and have equity. That's not their goal. What they're trying to do is take a bunch of money, pool it together for a real estate project, and then they're dispersing it usually when the project is done, right? So in that, they wanted to have something that offered a little bit more legal structure, but they didn't want the huge corporation and the stock and the equity because that wasn't fitting into their business model in essence, right? But they didn't want to be an unregistered partnership because they just wanted a little bit more legal. And remember, the LLC did not exist at this time, okay? We're predating the LLC. So these guys get together, guys and gals, if it was, I don't know, old story. They get together and they walk up to the doors of the IRS and they knock on the door of the IRS and they said, hey, IRS, we got this great idea. So literally the corporation structure is not working for us. We need this like cool little hybrid type company and it's going to allow us to have some legal protection and everything. Isn't this a great idea? Well, IRS in its traditional way of thinking things through and, working with people said, no, we've got self-employed persons, and a corporation on the menu. You want that fancy little hybrid thing you're talking about? You go under state statute. That's where the constitutional republic comes in, state statute. This is where the LLC was born. It was born as a state statute of a different type of hybrid registered legal company. Many people that hear things online, they might hear that IRS disregards an LLC is a disregarded entity. And they'll go, oh, yeah, it's a disregarded entity. I go, well, what does that mean? Well, I don't know. Well, it's because once it was formed on the state side, then the IRS disregarded it as an entity. So if they disregard it as an entity, when they see an LLC single member, they see a self-employed person just like a sole prop. When they see an LLC multi-member, then they see a partnership. That's why it's a disregarded entity. That's why the taxation is exactly the same. The legal's not. And if you guys have questions about, the legal difference between LLCs and corporations, we'll get into that. But I want to continue with this story. So this is why LLCs and sole props and LLCs and partnerships are taxed the exact same way. So as the story continues, the real estate industry is really happy. The LLCs are born. Each state has its own LLC. It's a great world, right? So here comes the gang now knocking on the IRS's door. And I will need to explain what I mean by this, but just follow with the story so I can close it and then I'll go into what I mean by it. So they come knocking on the IRS door and they say, hey, IRS, we really love that hybrid state statute. You didn't help us, but it's working great. IRS is wonderful. So he says, but we want something else now. We got the legal column. We like it, but we want that tax advantage, which I'm going to explain this because this is one of the next most misunderstood thing of being taxed as an S Corp. We want that little advantage. So when you register with the Secretary of State, your initial articles of incorporation registers you as a corporation. Then you file, if you desire to, a document with the IRS called 2553, an S election, electing that corporation to be taxed as an S Corp. If you don't, it's taxed like a C Corp, right? So you elect it to be taxed as an S Corp. So in this case, when they're knocking on the door begging for this opportunity for their LLC to remain a legally structured LLC, but to be taxed as an S Corp, the IRS said, here, fill out 2553 S election and you can be taxed like an S Corp. So this allows an LLC to be legally structured like an LLC and taxed as an S Corp. Now, why would they want to do that versus being legally structured as an S Corp? Well, because there's a big difference between a legal structure of an LLC and a corporation, and it depends on what you're trying to achieve. The corporation has stock, so immediately you're distributing stock, you've got the annual minutes, you've got the requirements that you have to fulfill. It's a complete different animal. So if you want a simple, with a little more legal advantages, legal protection, you don't maybe want to do a big corporation and have all that responsibility and filing and all that mess with the stock. So you form an LLC. So you can take and go the route of a simple formation of an LLC, and then you can choose the tax structure of an S Corp, which many companies do. That's how mine is structured. Now, that explains what an LLC is, how it is by state statute, and that explains why a sole prop and an LLC are taxed the same way. And it also explains quarterly estimates. And I did specifically say you got to not talk about S Corps when we talk about quarterly estimates, because that's going to be a new game. But I did explain how quarterly estimates work for sole props and LLCs in a way that hopefully this is starting to make sense, and it's a little fun too in having this conversation. Now, I want to, before I talk about what it means to be taxed as an S Corp, I want to talk about this other social media trend, which, okay, I'm doing my preaching, but I'm telling you guys, so many people are following these things on social media and they're just getting into legal and financial problem because they're getting these letters because they don't understand how it works. And one of the areas is this belief that you can set up a company in another state and thereby not have taxes in California, et cetera. So we'll get into the S Corp taxation in a minute, but I really want to talk about how this works. So in order to talk about how this works, we got to bring up a legal term called nexus. Sadie, it's Nexus, so people can research the word I'm talking about, Nexus. Nexus is a long-time legal term, and it really refers to if it's in a tax jurisdiction. Do you have to follow the tax laws of that jurisdiction? And nexus has a lot to do with a physical presence. Do you have a physical presence? That physical presence can be you physically there. It can be storage. It can be a long list of things, right? That's where sales tax expanded into economic nexus, that you didn't even have to have a physical presence. You could just be having an economic advantage in the state and have to collect sales tax. That's where the economic nexus law came in, I believe, 2018. But going back to nexus, so the words that the legal departments use a lot, it's kind of a slang word and it's become popular over the years because people can kind of get their head around it, is, are you doing business or are you engaging in transactions? So let's be an individual sitting at a kitchen table selling a necklace that they made on Etsy. It's about as simple as a business model as you can get, right? There's a lot, but you get what I'm saying. Because I'm sitting in my chair in the kitchen selling on Etsy, I have a physical presence. I have a nexus. I'm doing business in my kitchen. Okay. So that means that address has a physical presence. I'm doing business. I have to be registered in that state. So if I register my LLC in, the latest thing has been Wyoming, Nevada, Delaware. Delaware's got another reason why people do it. Each of these have reasons. As you can see, there's much more layers to all this than the 10-minute sound bites that you get. But if I choose, I'm a California resident, I'm sitting in California, I'm doing business in California, right? I'm physically got this presence. And it could also be there's other rules, a percentage of the customers you have. I don't want to make it sound like it's just Nexus. These are a long list of things. I'm just hitting the most popular one that people get confused on. So if I'm sitting in California, I'm a California resident, I'm filing California taxes, I'm doing business there, what have you, and I file in another state, I have to then register in California as a foreign entity doing business in California. That's the name of the forms. Now, when I do, that subjects me to the same rules, the same 800, every single thing as if I filed originally in California. So there's really no great advantage of filing in another state unless you're doing it for other reasons. Like I said, nothing is a black and white answer in tax and legal. I kind of learned that along the way. I kept looking for this black and white answer, and I thought when I became certified as a enrolled agent through the IRS, which I am, that I was going to finally get into a black and white role, and I realized there's just none. Everything has layers and layers and layers to understand it. So people have been told a lot lately that they can file a Wyoming LLC and that will give them autonomy. There, it's going to be where their data is not going to be known. They're not going to have to physically show their address. I always know that there's been something posted on social media, not because I follow it, but because I suddenly get a barrage of clients asking the same thing. And it's a weird thing out of the blue. So it's been about a year now. I want to file in Wyoming. I want to file in Wyoming. I want to file in Wyoming. I'm like, where's this coming from? Now let's dig apart the truth. In Wyoming, let's be a Wyoming resident for a second. I've got a nexus in Wyoming. When I open an LLC in Wyoming with a nexus, Wyoming doesn't require, like California does, that the owners, the directors, list out their name on the documents. Very true statement. Very true statement. But because I got a nexus in California, I got to file as a foreign entity in California anyway, and they require it. So my name's going to be there. So yeah, you can't go to the Wyoming one, but you can go to the California and you can follow the Wyoming through the California. Okay. So you're really not hiding anything. So I did some digging into social media because I'm like, no CPA, EA, lawyer is standing up on YouTube telling people to do this because they know there's no logic in it. You're just going to have to file and pay taxes in this state and file and pay taxes in this state. It just doesn't make sense. And so I found it goes back to a couple, and I can't remember the name, but it was like some big cryptocurrency people that were, saying that this will keep them from not having their name, which, I'm not a cryptocurrency expert. Maybe it does somehow. I don't know, right? But the point is, then everybody jumps on it. It's on the internet, but there's not some truth to it. Now, in Delaware, I want to now talk about the Delaware. There is, in many cases, a good reason to register in Delaware and then pay the additional amount to also be registered in California. However, 99.99, almost 100% of the clients we see through the SBDC, it doesn't count for them. So let's talk in just general terms about Delaware. So Delaware has been known for, I don't know how long, decades upon decades. Maybe it goes back to Christopher Columbus. I don't know. But Delaware has been long known as a state that corporations incorporate in. I'm talking about corporations now. And the reason being is that when you are registered within a specific state, like say I'm registered in Delaware, but I then am registered in California as a foreign entity doing business in California, if I'm in a big lawsuit, I can force the court to be heard, the courts, the lawsuit to be heard in the courts of Delaware, because that's my home registration, right? And you hear this on the news, it's been moved to the courts in this state, moved to the courts in that state, right? Now, Delaware has two things to understand in this. And this one is kind of subjective statements, and the other one is actual factual. So Delaware has been known to be more friendly to the corporations, especially in class action lawsuits, where you can kind of say California's not. If we're just talking about subjective, I'm not being political here. These things you've probably heard said. You don't really want a big corporate lawsuit coming into California, especially if it involves employees. You want to be more on the other side of things. And so when you have now, although that's a key, this next statement I'm about to say is really the important thing to know. When anything is heard in court, it could be IRS, it works the same way. It is dependent upon precedents. You know how they say, well, in 20 this, there was a precedent, Brown versus this, and they pull these precedents up in court because Congress makes the laws, and I'm not a complete historian, so bear with me in getting it as correct as I can, but Congress makes the laws. It's the courts that interpret the laws, right? And so the courts are the ones that are saying, well, how does this law apply to the situation? And so once a decision has been made, it is the precedents that are used again and again in the courts to make sure that, or I shouldn't say make sure, but to try to create an alignment with the previous decision so we have some consistency in our courts. That's kind of the overall goal, right? So because a lot of cases have been heard in Delaware over many periods of time, there is a lot of precedence. So if you're starting a company that you're concerned about a class action, it's a pharmaceutical, even like, for example, you create a car seat, for kids. I might want to be in Delaware that if anything happens, I got the precedents in the courts that I can have that heard in Delaware, right? Now, every time that a company incorporates within a state, the state gets a certain fee, it gets a certain amount to recognize the company. So if you want to incorporate in their state, have at it. They love it, right? So people are talking about, oh, you need to incorporate in Delaware. And so I have literally companies that are doing desktop web design that feel like they have to be incorporated in Delaware. I'm like, oh my friggin' God, you're just, do you want to just take your money and pay for additional admin and tax documents and stuff? Give me the money if you want to do that. So much of this advice that's being handed out is not being handed out with the reason why people will choose it. And I think that what I've come to conclude in my many years on planet Earth is every piece of good and bad advice has something that's fully in common in both. Each of them has a partial truth. It's like I'm always trying to figure out what the truth is. I drive myself crazy, especially these days. What is really the truth? What is the truth? And I've come to the conclusion that I can't pull out a little nugget of truth in any situation and say, this is all true because look, this is true. It doesn't work that way. Every single truth and lie has a little bit of truth in it. It's really the uncovering of the entire story. Why? What is the application? When does it make sense? When does it not make sense? It's that deductive reasoning, that strategic thinking, that analytical mind that I use AI too. I've said that to you. I'm not like a Luddite that doesn't use AI, but it really needs the human mind. And one of my favorite words is discernment. You have to have discernment to be able to ask the right questions. So if I ask a question without knowledge, I'm just going to get, file in Delaware because that's what it's going to pick up. Everybody's saying to do it. But if I turn on and say, well, when does it make sense? When does it not make sense? I can start getting more discernment. So you can get really misled when you don't have the basis of the reason the decision makes sense and the reason the decision does not make sense, because there are good reasons to be a sole prop. There are good reasons to be an LLC. There's good reasons to be a corporation. There's good reasons to be taxed as an S corp. All of them have good reasons, but it doesn't mean it's constantly the way to go. Now, I noticed that, Tahira, I might have said it wrong. Back to the Delaware example, what you're saying about filing there or not, you lost me. So really what I'm saying is if you're a large company or going to be a large company and you have a very strong concern about getting into a huge lawsuit, a huge class action lawsuit, and you want to make sure that if the courts hear your case, they are heard in a state that has a long time history of hearing corporation type lawsuits and have looked favorably along the corporation. If all that's in your house or whatever that term is, then you would want to choose Delaware. That's why a lot of companies that have investors, big companies that have investors, would choose Delaware. But, this brings to mind something else I need to mention is that a lot of times people are choosing what legal structure based on what they perceive they're going to be someday. And I'll have this discussion with people and they'll actually get upset with me. They're like, didn't do anything yet. They don't even have a product yet. And I'm going to, incorporate in Delaware and I'm going to be taxed as an. I'm like, well, you really could use that money in marketing right now. You're really not there. Oh, are you saying I'm not going to make it? No, I'm saying choose based on today. And I've started using this silly example, but it's like people finally get it. I'm like, okay, I'm 18. Would that be fun? No. I'm 18. I'm just heading out on my own. I'm getting ready to get my own apartment. But my goal is to have 3 kids and be married. So I'm going to get an apartment with 3 rooms. I can't afford it right now, but you know what? That's my goal. You go, that's crazy. Just get an apartment you can afford now. And then when you have 3 kids, you'll have a house or whatever, right? Same thing with legal structures. You can be the correct legal structure and tax in where you are today and you change it. I've changed my legal structure many times. So don't get caught up in trying to be what you hope to be. Goals are good. Guys, you know me enough. I'm into goals and dreams, but we don't create a goal or a dream and then pay for our existence based on that goal and dream. Otherwise, we could be working against it. Suddenly I see this every day. I'm not exaggerating, guys. People get in such complicated legal structures that they don't need to be in. They end up having, and I've seen some horrific things in December, and November. People end up owing 5 to 10,000 in fines because they didn't set this up correctly. They're out of business. They actually have to borrow money to pay them. And so a lot of making these choices is prohibited of actually making your goals. It's like, that thing we all have had it where we've watched a friend say they want to do something and then all the actions that they take is getting them in the opposite direction. That's kind of what I see a lot with the small companies. And like I said, they're just getting caught up in this hype. Back in the day when I was in my 20s and 30s and entrepreneurship wasn't the Hollywood thing, it was just mom and pops. We didn't get caught up on all that. We didn't go, well, what structure and what this? Today, people are like, I got an idea. And the first thing I need to do is I open up an LLC and they feel like they've done something because they opened up the LLC. I'm like, you still can't buy a quart of milk. Can't go without saying the quart of milk this year, guys. Figure out what you're selling to who first. Figure out what you got going on. Start acting in that capacity. You maybe find operating as a sole prop. And then when it makes sense to get an LLC, get an LLC. If it makes sense to get an LLC at the beginning, like I said, the reasons are very long list. There's no pet answer. You should be. That's why when I meet with people through the SBDC and they say, well, I think I want to be an LLC, or most of them say, what legal structure? We talk through it. What's going on? What is the legal risk? What is the financials? Where are you today? Well, why don't we go through and then see where we're going to be tomorrow? Now, to close this up on the taxation of an S Corp, and I won't get totally involved in it. I'll just kind of make this answer and then I'll answer any questions I got and we can come back to it if we got time yet. So it does make sense to be taxed as an S Corp. I'm going to give you the very short story on it. And in the very short story, there's a little bit of incorrectness, but it's something you can get your head around. When your company, if you're an LLC, you choose to be taxed as an S Corp, like I said, by doing an S election 2553. By the way, you have to make that choice 2 months and 15 days into the new year. You can't make it at the end of the year. You can't, place your bets. And once you make that choice, you have to commit to that for 5 years. Okay. If you're organized as a corporation, you're taxed like a corporation, right? So you're got to be taxed like an S Corp when you choose the S election, but an LLC can rescind in 5 years. Okay. So in that, when you are taxed as an S Corp, the game changes and the administrative cost and the complexity of managing the company changes. The long story short, I like to say, you need a good CPA, EA, that is skilled in and understands S corps. You need a bookkeeper. You need to, for the most part, you might need a bookkeeper. You may not if you're doing it properly or your company's very simple, like a consultant, right? But what happens is you technically become an employee of your company. And as you become an employee, you have to take what's called a reasonable wage in the form of a W 2. No LLCs, sole props do not take W 2s. Do not. When you're in a corporation, the working owner, they call it, versus an investor, working owner, they'd have to take a reasonable salary, like I said, in the form of a W 2. That reasonable salary is not really well defined, but once again, for precedence reasons, most tax preparers have the working owners in an S corp take between 50 to 60% of the net profit. Didn't say revenue, guys. I said net profit. Okay. That's your taxable net profit after all your expenses and any deductions are removed. So you would take that number and 50% of it is a W 2. That 50% is subject to a lot of taxes. First of all, you got to have a payroll company. You have to meet with the tax person before the end of the year to determine what that reasonable salary must be. You have to, the taxable W 2 is like a regular salary you got as an employee. FICA is taken out. In California, state disability insurance is taken out. Then, as you, as the company, has to match the FICA, the Social Security and Medicare, pay an unemployment, pay an ETT tax. So that 50% of that net profit that has to be taken as a W 2 is experiencing a ton more taxes and a lot of more admin help to get you there. The other 50% is known then legally as a distribution, and it's not subject to payroll taxes. The entire net income, net profit, whichever word you want to use, is subject to state and federal taxes. That does not change. And no different than an LLC, all of them, the whole amount. We are only talking about saving on payroll taxes, Social Security and Medicare. Because an LLC and a sole prop pays Social Security and Medicare only their portion on the entire net profit. Taxed as an S corp pays Social Security and Medicare and matched, so double 15% on half of the net profit, but the other half is not subject to payroll. So if you look at it, that decision makes your taxation go up at first, and it makes your admin go up, but then where you get the benefit of the 50% or 60%, whatever, 40% as a distribution is when you have a high enough net income, like it balances out and it turns in your favor where it suddenly makes sense to do so. Now, there's no hard, cold number that I can say it's absolutely this number, but let's just talk tentatively, okay? Tentatively, when you get where your net income, not revenue, is going to be in the area of 50, 60, 70, 80,000 for 5 years. Yeah, you can be benefited by being taxed as an S corp. So if you're starting to get into 30, 40, questionable, but if you're going to be hanging in the 50 on up, yeah, you can benefit from that. And at that point, one would hope you have enough profit to pay for the additional admin. But if you end up going under it, although you're not paying in as much tax, your profit's not there, you're still having to file a separate tax return. It's 1120S that's due in March. You have to meet with the CPA, tax person, EA, prior to the end of the year, then again to do the tax return in March, and then your personals in April. So, and then you have to have a payroll company to do that W-2. So you have a lot more involvement. But if you get to that point, there's an advantage. Now, for those that are what I call the solopreneurs, they, get paid and they don't have a lot of expense, they don't have a lot of overhead, they can get to that number pretty quickly, right? But for other companies may not. So I will literally see people go on social media and decide, okay, I didn't even start a company yet. I'm desktop publishing. I'm going to do a LLC and file to be taxed as an S corp immediately. It doesn't even make sense. It's just money out of the door. And I have to say, I have seen some tax people put people in the S corp column way too early. And I think it's one of two reasons if I was boiling it down. One is they say to the owner, well, oh yeah, it's going to be a big year. I plan on being there for 5 years, when the owner doesn't know what they're committing to, right? So they go, okay, and they change them over to that. Or some of them, I got to say, there's a little bit of unscrupulous where they get paid a lot more to have somebody taxed as an S corp. And I have seen people do that as well. Let's think it's mostly on the positive of just not communicating enough. So that is when it is an advantage and when it's not. So the advantage is there, but it's not to the point like some people make it out to be like, oh my God, I didn't get a chance to be taxed as an S Corp this year. So I would rather have a few years into it and then choose it than choose it and then not be at the target net profit and have to go through the additional cost, right? So it's not like, oh my God, I just spent so much money. I had somebody yesterday that told me that they were told that if they chose to be taxed as an S corp, they'll drop down from 30% tax bracket to 15% tax bracket. I'm like, that's not even logic because it's not changing your state and federal income tax. So there's just so much out there. It's real important to, once again, to have a good tax preparer that can help you to make the correct choice on this. It's crucial. And so in that you can see from what I've talked about so far is there's reasons for things, but the reasons are much more involved and have many layers than a soundbite would allow you to get the correct information. Now, before I run out of time here, I have Anonymous. I work as a sole prop. I received an email about using Gusto Solo for taxes. Would this be ideal? This is my own personal opinion. I don't know about, and when you say Gusto Solo, I'm assuming that you're talking about, and it may be something they're offering, doing tax returns, Gusto doing tax returns now. I'm going to actually ask as I go to another question. Anonymous, can you clarify for me so I don't go down the wrong pathway? Are you saying Gusto is going to file your tax returns for you or going to do it's not a paycheck, it's not a W-2 because you wouldn't use Gusto as a sole prop. So as I'm starting to answer this, I'm realizing I don't have enough information. So Anonymous, if you're still there, can you just put in the Q&A a follow-up and let me know if you're talking about Gusto filing taxes because maybe they do. I don't know that. There was something that was asked about the sole proprietor, something about matching. That wasn't a sole prop. That's when you're an S Corp. So if you're an S Corp and you need to do the reasonable salary and you write a W-2 for that amount, right? So it gets, let me back up and say, okay, I'm being taxed as an S Corp and you got a picture right now. There's two Lori's, okay? There's Lori here that is the owner, right? And there's Lori here that is the employee. That's how I have to do it. I play two different things. So Lori, the employee, needs which is the working owner, has to take the reasonable salary of 50 to 60%. So I get a W-2, let's say it's 100,000, I get a W-2 for 50,000. That 50,000 is just like a regular W-2 as an employee. So that means the state and federal is coming out of that W-2. That means Social Security and Medicare is coming out of that W-2. And in California, state disability insurance is coming out of that. Okay. Now that's Lori out of the 50,000. Remember, we started with 100,000 net profit, not revenue, net profit. So we had 100,000 net profit. We took the 50,000 and we got a W-2 out of it. And Lori got a W-2 and all those taxes Lori had to pay in, which is still me, the owner, right? Okay. Now, the owner part, I have to match that Social Security. So that means as the owner, I got to pay in another portion. I got to pay in another 7.65 in Social Security and Medicare. So between Lori, the employee that paid in 7.65 and Lori, the owner, that 50%, 50,000 in this case, is subject to 15% Social Security and Medicare. Now, Lori, the owner, also has to pay an unemployment, which can be up to 3.4%. Lori, the owner, has to pay an ETT tax, which is employer training tax. It's a California tax. It's 1% of the first 7,000. And I think I got everything on that. And of course, state and federal taxes goes to everything, right? So in that, I am paying on that 50,000. I've got to pay in the amount and I got to match it. So I got a higher amount of taxes that I'm paying in when I'm taxed as an S Corp on that 50%, but the other 50% does not have payroll taxes taken out. Still state and federal tax. Whereas let's be a sole prop with that 100,000. That whole 100,000 is going to be subject, state and federal is the same, but to only one, the state and I'm sorry, let me back up, only one of the sets, if I can call that, of Social Security and Medicare, i.e. 7.65%. So out of that 100,000, I'm going to pay 7.65% Social Security and Medicare. Out of this S Corp, 50%, I'm going to pay 15%, but on the other half, I'm not. But I'm going to have to pay all these other taxes. That's why there's a curve that when it gets to a certain point, it's suddenly beneficial to be taxed as an S Corp. So can you see? It's like, whoa, there's a whole lot of more to this than one would think. Anonymous, thank you. Automated payroll, Anonymous, you have no payroll as a sole prop. So no, it does not make sense. It's not even a legal thing you can be doing. Okay. So with Anonymous, great question. I'm going to spend the next 2 minutes talking about something. So from the perspective of sole prop and LLC, I'm going to answer how people ask me it. And this is kind of into what you're asking, Anonymous. How do you pay yourself? Okay. So when you are looking at your net profit, once again, your net profit, that is what's left over for you as the owner. It's all your revenue you made minus all your expenses, your net profit. That's what's left over for you as the owner, right? Now, that is what is fully taxed on. So the IRS doesn't care like when or how you take it. You're going to pay taxes on it. You could say, well, I left the whole, you probably wouldn't be 100,000. You wouldn't be taxed as a sole prop anymore. But I say you're a sole prop and your net income is 30,000 after all the expenses, right? So that 30,000 is going to get taxed no matter what. It's going to be taxed no matter what. Okay. That's the way it is, right? No matter what. So whether you take that 30,000 as a check, you do it as a transfer to you, or you leave it in the company bank account, doesn't matter. You're going to pay taxes on it. Okay. So paying yourself is just take the money out of the bank account. Now, if you have a net income of 30,000 and you paid yourself 50,000, you paid yourself more than you made. That's kind of like having a salary check more than you actually made. You owe the company back. So you do have to be conscious of how much you can take out financially. Now I'm putting in my little CFO hat because remember, I've got a CFO hat, a banker hat, I've got a tax hat, and a legal structure hat. Very unusual for one human being to have all those angles, but that's what helps me to have such a greater understanding of this content, I guess you could say, and be able to explain it. And it's just because if I say this, I told you I wanted black and white, I would be like, okay, I got the CFO part. I got it. I got it. I got my MBA. Now I understand everything. Why are the bankers saying, no, that doesn't make sense? Okay, I'm going to be a banker. Okay, now I know that. Ooh, I get it. That's a whole different way they look at it. Oh, investment banking. Oh, they look at that different. I'm still confused. It's got to be because I don't understand something about tax. I'm going to go and take this honking test. That was crazy. Okay. And become an enrolled agent. I was a little bit arrogant. Oh, it shouldn't be too hard to pass that test. Oh, let me tell you. But anyway, I was like, once I get this tax understanding, it's all going to be pretty and clean and black and white, right? I even studying for my enrolled agent, I go, oh my God. And here's my words of wisdom to you guys. The whole world's gray. Nothing's black and white. It's all gray. But anyway, going back to my point, that is why I understand so much of this is that I just happen to be a rare bird that went in so many of these different disciplines. And although I'm proficient in all languages, I say I'm an expert in some more than others, right? But I've been down the road and I'm old too. That's the other reason. Been on planet Earth a long time. But coming back to the sole prop and the LLC, paying yourself is just a matter of taking the money in whatever form's easier, switching it to your bank or whatever. But you got to be conscious of your net profit. There's that word, profitable, because you can't take out more than you earned. And if you didn't earn anything and you got debt, you can't buy a quart of milk. And our goal this year, and I'll end it on that, is to buy a quart of milk, in fact, many, and to be happy and to be able to sleep at night and not be so scared about debt and take our power back. I hope my little discussion has helped. I noticed nobody left, so you guys must have really liked what I talked about. If you have any questions or need to set up an appointment to meet with me, Sadie, you'll put the information on how you get in touch with me. Sadie, I talked for the whole hour again. Are you there, Sadie? I'm
I
bringing it back to you.
Oh my gosh, I was totally talking on mute because you know how it be. Oh my gosh. But no, Lori, I was riveted. I was fully into this thing. And no, definitely, folks, like Lori cares is the only way I can describe this. So like how she says, if you want to email her, please do. Like that's the thing. She is here to help you. She is passionate about what she does. So I wanted to hold off, but with all the chat happening there, I was like, okay, here's the email address to reach out to her. As you know, I stay on a couple of seconds later on. But Lori, that was such a good vibe that you started it off with, where you know what? Like, yes, let's make 2026 the year where we get our good sleep scores. We're not
Yeah,
stressing. So I'm very glad for that message. Like it really hit for me, and I really love the way you explained everything because people were like, just literally like hanging on your every word right there. Where I'm just like, yes, like this is what we need, Lori. We just need people to talk to us in a normal voice and tell us how this works.
I think that's so true, Sadie. And if there's one thing that I've learned being on planet Earth as long as I have been, or another way of saying it, I've heard this said in different podcasts where somebody would say, if you could go back today and talk to the Lori at any age and tell the Lori something, I've always thought that was such a fascinating thing to say. Um, I could go back at any single age and I would say to myself, Lori, honey, life doesn't have to be that hard. It's the choices we make. And I think a lot of it is from the programming that we get sold on. In my age, it was the two picketed fence or no, two car garage and picketed fence. We get sold on what we're supposed to be, the American dream, whatever you want to call it. It's got all these words, right? That we never really even get a chance to say, well, what do we really want? And what do we really need? And how much of this that we're killing ourselves or going in debt over do we really have to have? What does it really take at the end of the day? I'm not going to use the word to be happy because I think that's also an overused word, but to sleep sound and peaceful and to get up the next morning energized, excited, like a little baby wakes up and looks out in the world and goes, wow, this is a cool place to discover. I think that's where we need to get. And I know one thing for sure, if you're worried about money, it's very hard to get there. Very hard to get there. So with that, guys, thank you. Thank you for the lovely comments in the background. Yes, I got my hair cut. I see Randy's out there, my hair cutter. Do you like it? I cut it all off, Randy. I cut it all off. It's a new you. It's a new you. It's a new year. It's a new me. I'm going for it. Everything's going to be bright and sunny. I don't care what's going on in the world. Lori is going to have a good year. And I invite every one of you to join me. Sadie, you take over and you do all the wonderful stuff you do. And Sadie, I'm so glad to see you again. I saw Emma out there. Emma's coming next month back on the show. Please, I'm looking for guests. You know someone you want to be on, your neighbor, your friend, somebody that you think would be great on the show. I want more variety on the show. I reach out within my network and I just want more variety. So be a little of my scouter talent. Scouts for talent, okay? I got to go, everybody. Happy New Year. Welcome to the year of profitability and the year of it's going to be great. I will see you next week on Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Bye, everybody.
Bye, Lori.
Bye, Sadie.
All righty, guys. So yeah, awesome session, awesome session. Okay, so I put the links in there for you folks. I got a little survey going on. So we had a lot of activity in the chat today because I mean, it was just a riveting session. So let me put in some things in there for you again, just to make sure you can sign up for the webinars. If you have someone that wants to join Lori, be a presenter, if you want to see the past shows, and then if you're not a client of the SBDC, please become a client of the SBDC because it is your tax dollars at work. It's a no-cost service. So we love Lori and we have so many other business advisors that can help you in other areas, facets of starting your small business, growing your small business. So do not be shy. That is what we are here to do. So I'm going to hang out for a couple of seconds to make sure that you have all the links, you're able to capture them because I know that once I turn off this chat, you can't click on them and it's like hard to do a copy. So just go ahead, click, get into that, email thing. And if you need a little refresher, you don't see it in the chat because there's so much, information in there. Please definitely type me a little message in the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on that. But otherwise, I am going to put myself on mute so you can just scroll away. And on Lori's note, happy 26, guys. Let's make this year awesome.